Who's leading?
Joe.
Whose idea was this?
Whose idea was this? Yeah. Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Pierce Brothers. Today we're doing Movie Guns Part 2 out of who knows how many. We'll just do them until we run out of guns, I guess. But, yeah, these episodes are kind of fun, you know, because we love movies and movies are cool. And sometimes they have cool guns and sometimes they don't. And sometimes the gunplay is good and sometimes it's really bad. But the guns are still cool, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they use the wrong guns for the wrong era.
Yep. Before we get going, though, make sure and check out our Patreon and our channel memberships. Two different options. Patreon gives more of an unfiltered look at some stuff, and then channel memberships are easy because it's just part of YouTube. You know, if you're on YouTube, it's easy to join that way. Yeah, I guess, who do we want to start with today?
Well, I'll start with Dad today.
Okay,
Me?
I'll start with Dad this
Do
time.
I do all I brought or just one at a time?
One at a time.
Okay.
Yeah, I do one at a time and back and forth.
So I don't have to sit here and hold this heavy rifle through the whole thing. I'll talk about the rifle first. I brought along Yubertie 1873, and Yubertie's been producing these things since about 1973 or 74, right in there. I actually researched that years ago, trying to figure out when that really began for them, but never got a conclusive answer. But it was somewhere right in there. They've been making these rifles a long time. They're really good rifles. And, you know, the original 73 Winchester, let's talk about that a minute. Of course, you've seen that thing in all sorts of movies. You know, typically when they are used in movies, they're in 3840 or 4440, and they'd use what's known as 5-in-1 blanks, and it meant that they could fire in 3840 or 4440 rifles, or 3840, 4440, or 45 Colt handguns. So, you know, single actions. Typically, but they could you know, use this ammunition interchangeably, and it worked great on the movies, whatever. But here's the deal: that the 73 Winchester is actually the only gun that a movie was named after. I think it was just named Winchester 1873 or Winchester 73, starring Jimmy Stewart. Actually, the movie to me was okay, but the 73 in real life was a very iconic rifle. It was a significant development. It became widely popular on the frontier, and so to me, a great showman. Previous to movies was Buffalo Bill Cody, Wyoming, or Cody rather, who started the town of Cody, Wyoming. He was a tremendous showman. The real thing. He'd been a scout for the Army. He'd been a gunfighter. He'd been, you know, buffalo hunter, of course. He was a really interesting guy in real life. Phenomenal shot as well. And in spite of Browning designing rifles like the 86 Winchester and the 92, which fired the same length cartridges as this, he still continued to favor 73. And the 73 is just a very reliable rifle. When you run them, the cartridge goes straight into the chamber. There's no feeding issues like you get sometimes in 92 Winchesters, especially a lot of the reproductions that, you know, kind of had some problems to work out. But for the most part, those are good now. But that was truly a great rifle. They had side plates that could be removed. Of course, it was based on the original 1860 Henry rifle, but that was, of course, a rimfire. And then, of course, the 1866, which almost all those were rimfires as well, 44 rimfires. And then, of course, the 4440 was a center fire, had side plates that was easy to remove and disassemble and clean in the field. Very accurate rifles, very collectible. Originals in high shooting condition are difficult to, let's just say they're pricey. They bring pretty good money. So the reproduction, such as Yubertie, and Morocco makes a really good one too if you can find them. But they're great rifles, great shooters, and I've owned many of these for a lot of years, and they're really a worthy rifle. So there you go.
Jake?
Okay. I guess it's on to me. So my first pick would be the Colt 1851 Navy revolver. This one's a modern-made replica made by Pieta, and this one's in 44 caliber, which I know isn't technically correct. But cap and ball revolvers weren't there's been a whole lot of westerns made where guys should have been packing Captain Ball style revolvers, but of course, cheap westerns back in the day, they have them packing the 73 Colt Peacemaker, just because that was kind of the stereotypical cowboy gun. A good example would be The Searchers. If you watch that John Wayne movie, that's supposed to take place right after the end of the Civil War, like 1865 or 66, something like that. And of course, everybody's got Winchester rifles and Colt single action armies, But movies that did get it right, Bonanza, the first season of Bonanza, Little Joe, of course, packs a 51 Navy. Let's see, True Grit. In the original John Wayne movie, he talks about packing a couple of 51 Navies in his saddle holsters. He doesn't really show those in the movie, but in this remake in 2010, 2011, something like that, he does have a pair of he does have a pair of Captain Ball revolvers in his saddle holsters there that he actually uses in the final gunfight. But yeah, the 51 Navy, really good. Really good revolver, actually. Like, trying to think the word how to say it. It was the Colt's first belt pistol, true belt pistol. Before that, it was the Walker and the Dragoon, which were big, heavy guns. This one was kind of one of the first Colts that was handy belt size. So you could pack it around all day on your belt and not be carrying around a 4-pound revolver. So, trying to think of other movies. Clint Eastwood and some of his movies, actually. Good example would be The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He has a Colt 51 Navy, and his is a cartridge conversion gun, just for movie purposes to shoot blanks and stuff. So, but it was still had the look of the 51 Navy. So, yeah. So that was a pretty influential handgun from Colt. So very popular. These were made all the way up until 1873, I believe, when Colt discontinued production of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, they overlapped some of the production with single action army, I think.
Yeah.
They used up the parts and so forth.
Yeah. So.
Yep. I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do the Glock 34 first. Some of the most, I guess, modern movies that have cool, actual, more realistic gunplay would be the John Wick series. And the Glock 34, he carried one of those in the second one and the fourth one. His, of course, was all customized by Terran Tactical and really fancy and cool. Mine is one I just did myself. It's a Boba Fett themed Glock 34. I painted it, stippled it, put the magwell and all that on there. So really nothing too fancy. And then the night sights, of course. But I love Star Wars and I'm kind of a nerd that way. So, but kind of a nerd. Yeah, I'm a full-blown Star Wars nerd. And then I wear a one ring from Lord of the Rings as my wedding ring. But anyways, yeah, John Wick, really cool action movie, and he uses a lot of really cool guns in those movies. But yeah, Glock 34, that's one I've got. And then I got another one from John Wick. Well, Porter and Dad are going next. I'm going to walk over and grab it and show it on my next one. But all right, Porter.
My turn.
Yep.
All right. Well, one of my picks, is a long range, like an AR-10 style. This is a PWS. PWS, I guess it's called the MK2. It's in 6.5 Creedmoor. I got on here a loophole LRP scope. I know the LRP scopes actually went out of production, so the scope is actually a few years old. But it's a loophole, so it still works. And then I got on the JK Armament. Sorry, Joe. You're good. JK Armament 30 cal. Anyways, I think
muzzle device.
Sorry, muzzle device. I know I can't say the S word. Anyways, but this gun, I'm on. Let's see here. I guess it was last summer. I took it out to 1,065 or whatever it was. Got 4 out of 5 hits on a silhouette target. First rounds out of this gun for me, so I'd consider that a win. Anyways, but in different various movies, especially like Lone Survivor, and stuff, they use a similar type. It wasn't an actual.
They use a Mark 12.
Yeah, Mark 12s. Yeah, Mark 12s or whatever, long range.
You're still limited though by a Mark 12. It's only 5.56.
Yeah.
Whereas
this is a 6.5 Creedmoor, so it's a little better for range and everything. But it's the same kind of concept of a good sniper rifle that has fast follow up shots,
lightweight.
Yeah, it's actually not bad. Like. It's not too bad on weight. I need to get a sling on or whatever. Start using it for coyotes more stuff.
But he needs to paint it.
I need to paint. I'm thinking snow camo. But anyways,
you mean stormtrooper? We'll put an imperial symbol on there.
I'm thinking white and then put on green highlights. Or whatever. Cool. So. White and green, but that's kind of one of my picks. There's a lot of different movies that are the combat style movies that they use long range setups, especially in ARs, because you get faster follow up shots, especially for those type of movies.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yep.
My turn again.
Yep.
One thing I forgot to mention briefly on this gun, the 73 Yuberties. The originals, of course, were 32-20. They made a few in 22 rimfire, actually, but very collectible, by the way. But these, the originals were 32-20, 38-40, and 44-40. But the Yuberties, by the way, are available in 357 and 44 Magnum through special heat treating. The steels are able to get the toggle link action to work in 44 Mag, but also 44 Special, 45 Colt. So, a little more for modern shooters, if you will. So, my next gun, I still remember being in Troy, Ohio. A friend took me to the movies, and never heard of them. I'd never heard of this show before. In those days it was different. First off, I wasn't a movie buff, but I'd never heard of the movie being advertised or promoted. It's called Indiana Jones. Anyway,
one of the greatest of all time movies.
That was a really good show. But it was, but of course, he carried what was supposed to be, and I'm going to make Jake elaborate on this a little bit, what was supposed to be a third model Smith & Wesson hand ejector 44 Special, 4-inch barrel, very handsome gun. This is an original. These are very rare guns, actually. I don't think anybody really knows how many are made, but probably less than 100.
Of the 4-inch?
Of the 4-inch?
Yeah, probably.
Probably. I mean, we really don't know, but this is a very scarce gun, very desirable, and this gun shoots very well. It's a classic gun, of course, built on the end frame. 44 Special really needs no introduction to anybody that's ever followed my articles, but that's one of the coolest movie guns that's ever been put to use. But Jake has done the research on it. I think they actually didn't they use a
1917
modified.
They used 2 different handguns. One of them was chambers and stuff had been cut and basically been deactivated because it was they're running it from a British studio or something. That one was a 4.55 Mark II hand ejector, so one of the ones that was sent over to England during World War One, and of course they had a chopped off barrel and a ramp front sight put on it. And then there was a
it shrouded?
No.
Okay.
No, and then there was a 1917 that was also had a cut off barrel and a modified front sight. Barrel lengths were right around the 4-inch mark. They might have been a little under that, but yeah.
So those are prop guns.
Yeah.
But this is what they were supposed to be duplicating, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, something along those lines. I mean, even like a second model hand ejector or something with a 4-inch barrel, something along those lines. So
okay.
Yeah.
I thought I remember it being shrouded, but it doesn't matter.
No. Yeah, they're never shrouded in the movie. So
okay.
But yeah, that's 4-inch end frames from that era were just pretty cool. So
Yeah, the fixed sights.
yeah,
More snag, of course, the half moon rounded front, very handsome gun. We'll try to insert some pictures of this at some point, but
yeah. I might have actually got that wrong. I think the 1917 was the deactivated gun, and the 4.55 was the one that they used for the shooting sequences.
the blanks.
I think so, but I have to go back and look. So, yeah.
All right, Dave, you're next.
So my next gun, this one's actually a replica made by Cimarron of a
Jake and all
so,
This is a real replica.
well, yeah. So there's the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I already mentioned that one previously, but there's the ugly character, the Tuco the Rat, the Mexican in the movie. At one point, he goes to a gun shop and he just goes behind the counter, starts grabbing guns out and taking them apart. You know, they pull out the wedge, swapping barrels and cylinders till you get ones that feels right and that's not wore out, and that's what he goes with for the rest of the movie. And so what it ended up being was basically a 51 Navy with a Leech and Rigdon, so Confederate half round, half octagon barrel. And of course, in the movie, they were cartridge conversion guns. They're supposed to be cap and ball, you know, stand-ins for that. But so this one's chambered
a
at
lot easier to
45
shoot
Colt.
blanks when they're
Yeah. So that's what this one is. It's a 45 Colt, and so Cimarron makes this, or has it made by Ubertie. Pretty nice little handgun, actually. So
That's pretty
good
cool.
shooter.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's the scene that John Wick copied. I think Joe's going to talk about that next.
I was actually going to mention that, because I've got
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where they kind of got the idea for the John Wick
it
movies.
was a throwback to that, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So in John Wick Chapter 3, that's my next gun here. I was going to do this in the first one, I just mentioned John Wick, but at the very beginning, he grabs a gun, they're in this fight, and he's kind of in a museum kind of area, and there's a bunch of old single actions laying around. He finds a cartridge, grabs a gun, doesn't fit, so he has to do all these swaps with parts and that, gets it to work, and then shoots one shot and kills the guy. So he does all this work for one shot and then moves on to fighting with knives and whatever else. But it was a 1875 Remington. This is a Yubertie Outlaw, which is kind of their take on it. So
that's supposed to be the 1890 Remington.
yeah, which close enough, it's a Remington.
Right.
Dad's like, oh, they're different. They are, but the 1875 had a different undercut and all that.
Little web thing.
Yeah, yep.
So,
but anyways, so yeah, that was kind of John Wick's throwback nod to the good, the bad, and the ugly. That was kind of a cool scene. He's sitting there swapping cylinders and parts and all that until he gets the cartridge to work, and then shoots the guy one time and then moves on.
Well, he swapped a barrel or two as well. I'm not sure how he did that.
Because it's a movie.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Did you guys each just bring two?
I got one more.
I got one more too.
I only brought the one.
Okay. So Port, see, we had to get 10 total, so we each brought 3 and Port brought 1. And we didn't even plan that.
So it's my turn again?
Dad's turn again.
Yeah, so those who know me know my love of the old Colt single action. I brought along here a second generation, a very early second generation Colt, made in 45 Colt, of course. This one is fitted with stag stocks instead of the original black rubber. I remember as a kid, we worked like crazy on the ranch, and come in the evening time on Saturday night, just taking your bath, getting ready for Sunday and all that stuff. And if we got our work done in time, we could usually watch Gunsmoke. And I remember still, old James R. Ness carrying a 7.5-inch single action 45 in there with plastic stag stocks on it. And his later series of Gunsmoke, he went to real stag. But he carried both Great Westerns and Colt single actions in that. The early guns, of course, those were Great Western grist, but I actually had a friend years ago, it's long since passed, he was one of the writers for Gunsmoke, and he kind of enlightened me on what they did with the prop guns a lot on there, and the best information he gave me is, you carried both Great Western and Colt. So I bought my first 7.5-inch Colt single action. I'd bought one prior to this, but it was a 5.5 inch. Was probably 1977 if I remember correctly, and it's a great shooting. They're great shooting, barrel length and all that. But I don't use them much just because they're a little long and cumbersome. I carry a gun daily, and so I opt for the shorter lengths typically. There was another Western too that kind of fit that configuration, the 7.5 inch single action with stag stocks. It was Big Valley.
Nick, isn't it?
Nick Barkley.
Yeah.
He carried one.
Yeah.
So, but you know what's funny? I was going to insert this. Del Reed was a famous fast draw artist, and he told me when he was first starting. Of course, he knew James Arness and so on, but when he first started, he was doing a fast draw with 7.5 inch Colt. Now, Fell's not a big guy. He's a pretty small guy. I've got a picture of him next to James Arness, and he told me it seemed like James Arness was at least 7 foot tall. but Fell is very, very short in relation to James Arness. It's actually a pretty cool photo. But he said when he first started, of course, he was drawing and using 7.5 inch. Live ammunition had to hit a target. This was not just a blank firing and break a balloon or whatever to stop the timer. So, he ultimately went to a 5.5 and then 4 3/4, and that's what he stayed with that. But he set many world records with fast draw that still stand. So, but it was just interesting that he started with a 7.5 inch 45 as well. So, but that's actually a really cool movie gun. So there you go.
Yeah, good old Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
Stag grips, especially from that era, was
that
a
was the
big
thing.
deal,
Big deal.
That was
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the DVD.
It may not have been historically all that accurate for, I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of historical guns from the 1870s or 1880s with Stag, but
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you bring that up because I've studied the grips that were used in various parts of the country during the Old West, and it's funny because in Arizona or the southern part of the country, the mother of pearl grips were or stocks technically they're called, were very, very popular. But you go to the north, and of course Montana and Idaho, and that section across there, the ivory was by far preferred. But Jake's right. The Stag was not very common in the Old West. There were some there. A lot of them were not honest cut sandbar Stag like these are. A lot of them were jig bone. And I've got some of those, several sets of those actually, very well made, very nice, but they were not common. They were not. You could order a Colt with factory mother pearl or ivory or whatever you wanted on there, but Stag was not a common material. That was more of a Hollywood thing when the plastic ones that looked terrible came out.
Mhm.
They had Great Western, but they were even around before the war too. But that became a very popular look because of television. So,
yeah. It's funny how television or movies influence
The gun
the
world.
trends so much,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my last gun, I got the French 1873 Chamelot de Vigne revolver. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, but so these are, of course, adopted by the French in 1873. So same year that Americans went with the single action army. Double action. That's of course chambered for a fairly potent cartridge. These were chambered for. I mean, technically, it's an 11 millimeter cartridge. So technically, kind of the same 45-ish caliber, but those were being pushed with 40 grains of black powder or modified loads. I think were like 30 or something like that later on.
Well, actually, it was reversed. That the very early loads. This has been printed so many times that it's incorrect. But the very, very early loads were actually 30 grains with a 250 grain bullet, which gave about 850 feet per second. And then the first commercial load I could find, or any load for that matter, that went to 40 grains was in 1880 with UMC. So
Yeah,
but the point was they wanted power.
yeah.
So
On the French, their load was, I don't even know, but it was pushing their bullet at like 450, 500 feet a second, something like that. So it was
Pretty slow.
Pretty slow.
enough to pierce the skin.
my round ball loads do that.
Well, And the French Navy did adopt a same cartridge. They just adopted a different load. I think they lengthened the case a little bit, and we're pushing a 200 grain bullet at like 700 feet a second, which was a little better, but they dropped that load pretty early on. But I mean, it's a really well thought out double action revolver, but you know, the French always have to do something wrong, and they went with the worst ballistic cartridge in the world.
Yeah.
And
So what you're saying is that you're going to shoot the guy with this. He's going to just be really, really mad.
It's gonna have
Yeah.
real good bruise.
well, I mean, I guess, you know, a 500 foot a second load will still kill somebody. I mean, it just won't. You just don't get the same
The
amount.
decisive effect
Yeah.
of a 45.
Yeah. So,
What movie is it from?
the Mummy.
The Mummy.
So,
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember.
So, the main character, Brendan Fraser's character,
He carries
of course,
a pair of those. Right?
yeah, he's of course a French Foreign Legion guy, so American and the French Foreign Legion. But he carries a pair of these throughout the movie, and yeah, uses them, dual wields them pretty much the entire movie. You know?
Yeah.
So
That's why he has to shoot every single person he shoots like 10
3 or 4
times.
times.
That is a pretty cool movie, though.
Yeah.
You gotta love the original Mummy movie.
Yeah, those were pretty good.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's interesting because the French, they designed such a good thought out action. You know, little things about it are awful, like the ejector rod here only goes down, I mean, barely pushes the case out. So little things like that are awful, but in terms of the strength of the action, they're actually a pretty strong, well thought out handgun. Americans didn't really have any good double action until, I mean, right around the turn of the century. So, but yeah, anyways.
The 1877 Lightnings and Thunders, and of course the 1878, they were pretty popular, but they did have some mechanical issues.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it wasn't until the 1890s that Colt and finally Smith and Wesson really came out with a modern, what we know today as a modern double action.
Yeah. On the front, the Smith and Wesson, they had their Frontier top break double actions, and those were decent, but they still weren't. Honestly, I don't think they were as good as this. I've owned 1 or 2 of those before, and yeah, I still think this was a better built gun, just internally. So yeah, so that's my my last movie gun.
All right. I guess we saved the best for last.
The best for last.
Just kidding. We had some good ones today, but I'm going to mention this AR-15. It's a Bravo Company, BCM, Recce 14. This one, of course, has the tiger stripe. I've got another one of these I've put over 5,000 rounds through. This one, obviously, no scope yet. It is on order coming, so we're going to put a Trijicon Credo on there, but this rifle was used by James Reese or Chris Pratt in the Terminal List series. That's on Amazon. If you haven't watched it, you should go watch it. It's based on a book series by Jack Carr. Really a cool rifle, but for the money, it's probably the best high-end AR-15 out there. You get these for right around $1,500. This one, of course, has the cool tiger stripe pattern. That came from the factory that way, so that's kind of neat. But yeah, ultra reliable. That other one, over 5,000 rounds with 0 malfunctions. Only cleaned it once during that whole time. Oiled it, but yeah, I mean, you're going to spend around $1,500 for a really, really well-made gun. And yeah, I mean, I'd recommend BCM over any other gun company out there if you're wanting to just get a good base AR-15 for kind of the end of the world scenario. This would be the gun. But yeah, Chris Pratt in the series uses it. In the books, he didn't start using a Bravo Company until I think book 4. He started using a BCM. That's the first mention of it. But in the series, they had him use it in the first season. So now I can't mention James Reese without mentioning his tomahawk. This is the Winkler RND with the front spike. Pretty cool tomahawk, made famous by James Reese and the Terminal List, but these were used are very popular in the Special Forces world, and that's why Jack Carr chose to use that as his primary edged tool in the Terminal List series. There's a pretty cool scene in the movie with that. It's different than the book. The book, there's quite a few cool scenes with it throughout all 6 or 7 books, however many there are now, Jake. I don't remember.
I don't even know.
There's a lot. But yeah, I'm rereading them again now for the 2nd time or 3rd time, something like that. They're pretty good books. So great books, great movies. And the author of the books is a big gear guy. He loves his gear. So in the books, he's very specific about what gear and what weapons and things he's using, which is I love because I'm a gear guy myself. And they tried to bring that into the movie, you know. So he has same kind of gear and things that he's using. But
Joe, you're not a gear guy. You're a gadget guy.
Gadget guy. Yeah. Gear and gadgets. Yep, that's me. I always got to have cool gear on my stuff. Like this, I mean, I've got, anyways, the magwell, the rail scales, the light, offset irons. I got the irons sighted in. We did a short on that here, but so the offset irons are ready for the scope when it arrives, but excited to get that all put together. But yeah, I like my gadgets. So, yep.
All right.
Port's over here all stiff because he broke some ribs this week. He's like, let's finish this video so I can go stretch.
Is that a branding? And,
Yeah.
Got me enhance the story or just tell like
That's not it.
Had a little malfunction with his horse.
and the calf. Sometimes things go wrong at brandings.
Yeah, it did. And, well,
Porter's like a 80-year-old man in a 28-year-old body.
30.
30. Oh, you're 30 now? Wow.
It's all downhill.
Yeah.
So,
Seems like every couple months, Port's got some kind of injury that's animal inflicted.
probably.
Well, the good news is he's only broke one rib and cracked another.
Yeah.
You can hear it popping in there.
It's pretty tight right now. So.
All right, guys. So we hope you enjoyed this Movie Guns Part 2. We'll do a Part 3 in another month or so, probably. So stay tuned for that. I don't know when we're going to run out of guns, but probably sometime. But
one of these days.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Again, subscribe, like, share, all of that. Let us know what your favorite guns are from the movies we mentioned today, and then we'll see you next time.